In that moment, looking into the eyes of the man before her, Ellen could hardly believe how everything could change in the blink of an eye, and she had no idea of the surprises destiny still had in store. But not so long ago, the wind blew weak across Wyoming, 1889. Creaking, creaking. The windmill at the McCrae farm turned slowly, almost stopping, like even the air itself was tired. Ellen McCrae walks through the dry yard, 50 years on her back, widowed for 3. Her footsteps echo on the parched ground. Each step echoes in the heavy silence. She stops at the well. The windmill barely moves. The metal creaks against the dead wind. That sound, she knows it well. It's the sound of loneliness. Ellen lowers the bucket, pulls it back. Almost empty, just a few drops at the bottom. She sighs, the same sigh as yesterday. In the kitchen, she mends an old shirt, stitch by stitch, like the days that pass, one after another, always the same. The chickens peck in the yard. Ellen throws corn kernels. They run, fighting over each grain. At least they still have hope, she thinks. Ellen prepares thin soup, onion, potato, a little broth. For one person only, always for one person only. She sits at the wooden table, the chair on the other side, empty. 3 years empty. The silence weighs as much as the loneliness. Ellen walks to the porch. The night wind touches her face, cold and lonely, like her. On the horizon, faint lights shine from neighboring farms, families gathered, children's laughter. Ellen knows these sounds from a distance. Tomorrow will be like today, Ellen whispers to the wind, and the day after that too. But the wind doesn't answer, never answers. Ellen goes back inside, closes the door. The wood creaks, another lonely sound in the silent night. She doesn't know that in the nearby hills, watchful eyes observe her farm, that plans are being made, that her loneliness is about to be broken in a way she never imagined. The windmill stops completely, as if the air itself is holding its breath, waiting. Morning comes with the same weak wind. Ellen feeds the chickens with what little corn she has left. The drought has been merciless this summer, 3 months without real rain. A sound breaks the morning silence, hoofbeats. Ellen looks up, shading her eyes against the sun. 2 riders approach, a man and a child? They stop at her fence. The man removes his hat. Ellen notices the gesture, respectful. "Morning, ma'am," he says. "Name's Thomas Garrison. This here's my son, Caleb." The boy waves shyly. His eyes dart around the farm, taking in the chickens, the struggling garden, the creaking windmill. "We're looking for work," Thomas continues, "and maybe a place to rest for a while." Ellen studies them. Their clothes are dusty but clean. The boy's boots are too big for him, but his father's eyes, there's honesty there, and something else. Loss, maybe. "What kind of work?" Ellen asks. "Whatever needs doing, ma'am. I can fix fences, tend livestock, repair buildings. We don't eat much." The boy suddenly speaks up. "Pa, look at those chickens. They're so fat and happy." Ellen feels something shift inside her chest. When was the last time she heard a child's voice on her land? "Where are you coming from?" she asks. "North," Thomas says simply. "Lost our place in the spring floods. I can't pay much," Ellen warns. "Room and board would be enough. We're not looking for charity, just honest work." Caleb slides off his horse and walks to the fence. One of the chickens comes closer, curious. The boy laughs softly. "She's not scared of me, Pa." "That one's Henrietta," Ellen finds herself saying. She's the friendliest of the bunch. Ellen opens the gate. Come on in, but move slow. Caleb steps carefully into the yard. Henrietta clucks and comes closer. The chicken actually lets him stroke her feathers. Animals always do, Thomas says, watching his son. It's people he has trouble with sometimes. The sound of another horse interrupts her thoughts. Alice Munro rides up on her mare. Ellen, Alice calls out, I brought you some books from the school library. Alice Munro, 40 years old, never married, devoted to education. The only woman in town who dares to speak her mind. Ellen's closest friend. Alice notices Thomas and Caleb immediately. And who might these young gentlemen be? Thomas Garrison, ma'am. This is Caleb. A pleasure. I'm Alice Munro, the school teacher. She looks at Caleb. Can you read? Caleb nods eagerly. Pa taught me. I love stories about cowboys and Indians. Alice turns to Ellen, raising an eyebrow in question. They're looking for work, Ellen explains. Good, Alice says firmly. Ellen needs the help whether she admits it or not. In the distance, a horse snorts. Ellen sees Silas Boone on his property line watching them. His face is hard, disapproving. The drought has made him bitter. His own well ran dry last month. But more troubling. Another rider appears on the road, Victor Hale, attorney for the Cattlemen's Association. His black suit looks out of place, his horse too fine, too expensive. He doesn't stop, just rides slowly past, his eyes taking in the scene, Thomas and Caleb, Alice's presence, Ellen's small act of kindness. When he's gone, Alice shakes her head. That man is trouble, Ellen. He's been asking questions in town about water rights. Thomas notices the exchange. Problem? The kind that make honest people nervous, Alice replies. Caleb looks up at his father. Pa, can we stay? Please, I like it here. Thomas looks at Ellen. She sees hope in his eyes, carefully controlled but unmistakable. 1 week, Ellen says finally. Trial period. You won't regret this, ma'am, Thomas says quickly. But as Ellen watches Victor Hale disappear over the hill, she wonders if she already does. The windmill creaks in the wind, still struggling, but maybe not quite as lonely as before. Ellen wakes to absolute silence. No creaking, no grinding, no sound at all from the windmill. She hurries outside, still in her nightgown and shawl. The windmill stands perfectly still, dead still. Not even a breath of wind moves the blades. Thomas, she calls. He emerges from the small barn where he and Caleb have been sleeping, takes one look at the motionless windmill, and grabs a bucket. Let me check the well, he says. Ellen follows, her bare feet cold on the morning dirt. Thomas lowers the bucket on its rope. It descends, and descends, and descends. When he pulls it back up, the bucket is bone dry. That's impossible, Ellen breathes. Yesterday there was water, not much, but... Thomas examines the windmill mechanism. His face grows dark. Ellen, come look at this. She climbs the few rungs of the windmill ladder. Thomas points to the pump mechanism. Metal shavings glitter in the morning sun. Gears are stripped. Bolts are missing entirely. This didn't happen naturally, Thomas says grimly. What do you mean? Someone did this on purpose. Ellen stares at the destroyed mechanism. Her legs suddenly feel weak. Who would... Well, why would anyone... Thomas kneels beside the wellhead, examining the wooden frame. Look here. He points to fresh gouges in the wood. Someone pried this open, tampered with the pump from below. Ellen's breath catches. Silas. Your neighbor? His well went dry last month. He's been bitter, angry, but I never thought—" She trails off, staring at the sabotage. "I never thought he'd do this." Caleb appears at Ellen's side, rubbing sleep from his eyes. "Miss Ellen? Why isn't the windmill moving?" Ellen looks down at the boy's trusting face. "How do you explain that someone would destroy your only source of water? How do you tell a child that neighbors can become enemies?" "It's broken, sweetheart," she says softly. "Can Pa fix it?" Thomas examines the damage more closely. "I can try, but whoever did this knew what they were doing. They didn't just break it, they destroyed it." Ellen walks to the edge of her property line. In the distance, she can see Silas Boone's farm. His well stands dry and abandoned. His fields are brown and cracked, but his house— smoke rises from his chimney. He's still there, still watching. "Ellen," Thomas's voice is gentle but firm, "you need to report this to the sheriff." "Sheriff Carson won't care. He's got bigger problems than water disputes between neighbors." "This isn't a dispute. This is sabotage, destruction of property." Ellen laughs bitterly. "You don't understand how things work here, Thomas. When times get hard, people look out for themselves. Silas probably convinced himself he had a right to that water. And you? What about your rights?" Ellen stares at the dry bucket in Thomas's hands. 3 empty buckets sit beside the useless well. The image burns into her mind. Everything she's worked for, everything she's held on to since her husband died, it can all disappear, just like that. "I don't know," she whispers. Thomas sets the bucket down and walks to her side. "We'll figure this out, all of us." "We'll." "You're not alone anymore, Ellen. Remember that." Caleb slips his small hand into Ellen's weathered one. "Don't worry, Miss Ellen. Pa can fix anything." Ellen looks down at the boy's hopeful face, then at Thomas's determined expression. For 3 years, she's faced every problem alone, every hardship, every loss, every long night of worry. But now— In the distance, a lone rider appears on the horizon. Even from far away, Ellen recognizes the black suit, the expensive horse. Victor Hale, riding slowly past her property line, observing the broken windmill, the dry well, the small group of people standing helplessly beside empty buckets. He doesn't stop, doesn't wave, just watches and rides on. He's been expecting this, Ellen realizes aloud. Thomas follows her gaze. "Who is he?" "Trouble," Ellen says quietly. "The kind of trouble that doesn't come alone." The windmill stands silent against the morning sky. No creaking, no grinding, no sound at all except the wind through dry grass and the distant thunder of hoofbeats riding away. "First thing we need is parts," Thomas says, examining the destroyed windmill mechanism. "Gears, bolts, maybe a whole new pump assembly." Ellen shakes her head. "The nearest supplier is in Cheyenne. That's a 3-day ride, and I don't have money for new parts." "Then we make our own." Thomas runs his hands over the damaged gears. "My father was a blacksmith back in Missouri. I know metal. I know how things fit together. Artu ma artik ra." He looks at Ellen with quiet confidence. "Give me a week. Let me try." Something in his voice. Ellen finds herself nodding. "What do you need?" "Your husband's tool shed, some scrap iron, and Caleb to help me work the bellows." Ellen leads them to the shed behind the house. She hasn't opened it in 2 years. The door sticks, but Thomas puts his shoulder to it, and it gives way with a groan. Sunlight streams into the dusty space. Tools hang on wooden pegs. A small forge sits cold and silent in the corner. Your husband was a craftsman, Thomas says softly, running his fingers over a perfectly balanced hammer. James could fix anything, or... Ellen says, her voice catches slightly. He built half this farm with his own hands. May I use his tools? He would have wanted them used, Ellen says. For the next 3 days, Ellen's farm fills with sounds it hasn't heard in years. The ring of hammer on anvil, the wheeze of bellows, the hiss of hot metal meeting water. Caleb works beside his father, pumping the bellows with fierce concentration. Steady now, son, Thomas instructs. Metal's got its own rhythm. Ellen finds herself drawn to the shed doorway, watching them work. Father and son move together like dancers who know each other's steps. Miss Ellen, Caleb calls during a break, come see what Pa made. Ellen approaches the workbench. Thomas has crafted a perfect gear, its teeth precisely cut and filed smooth. It's beautiful, Manon, she says, and means it. 1 down, 7 to go, Thomas grins. While they work, Ellen finds herself doing things she hasn't done in months. She bakes bread from her precious flour reserves. Real bread, not the hardtack she's been living on. She cleans the spare bedroom for Caleb. You don't have to do all this, Thomas says that evening, as they sit down to a real supper. I want to, Ellen realizes as she says it. I'd forgotten what it felt like to cook for people who appreciate it. Caleb devours his food eagerly. This is the best chicken I ever ate, Miss Ellen. It's just chicken, child. No, ma'am, Caleb says seriously. It's chicken made with caring. Pa taught me the difference. Ellen looks at Thomas. He's watching his son with such tenderness that she has to look away. After supper, Ellen pulls out an old leather-bound journal. My husband's agricultural diary, she explains. He wrote down everything about farming this land. She opens it carefully. James's neat handwriting fills the pages. Look here. She points to an entry from 1886. Well, pump working perfectly. Water level holding steady at 23 feet. Thomas studies the entries. Your husband was thorough. He loved this land. Ellen runs her finger over the faded ink. After he died, I couldn't bear to read it. Too many memories. But now, Thomas asks gently. Now, I think maybe it's time to remember, to use what he learned, to teach someone else. The next morning brings Alice Munro with her sleeves rolled up and determination in her eyes. Ellen McCrae, you look exhausted, Bee, she announces. I'm here to help. She turns to Caleb. Young man, how would you like to learn some reading and arithmetic while your father works? Caleb's eyes light up. Yes, ma'am. Good. We'll start with your farm diary, Ellen. Caleb can help me copy the important entries. Pa, Caleb calls from the porch later. Miss Alice says the diary shows we got water rights going back 15 years. Legal water rights. Ellen and Thomas hurry to the porch. Alice is reading from the diary. Your husband was very careful about documentation, Ellen. He filed official claims with the territorial government, paid fees, got certificates. This water legally belongs to your property. Ellen stares at the diary entries, her husband's methodical notes about water claims, government fees, legal documentation. James had been protecting their future, protecting her. He knew, she whispers. Somehow, he knew there would be disputes over water someday. Thomas places a gentle hand on her shoulder. Smart man, your husband. As the sun sets, the windmill still stands silent, but the forge glows red in the gathering darkness. And inside the farmhouse, voices fill rooms that have been quiet for too long. Ellen writes in the diary for the first time in 3 years. September 15th, 1889. Windmill sabotaged, but repairs underway. Thomas Garrison and son Caleb proving invaluable help. Alice Monroe assisting with legal documentation. Water rights confirmed. Hope returning. She pauses, then adds, "Some things are worth fighting for." Outside, the night wind stirs the still windmill blades, just barely, but enough to suggest that soon, very soon, they might turn again. 6 days of constant work, 6 days of hammer strikes and forge fire, 6 days of Thomas and Caleb working from sunrise to sunset, their hands black with soot, their faces streaked with sweat and determination. Ellen wakes on the 7th morning to an unfamiliar sound. Creaking. She bolts upright in bed, her heart racing. That sound, she hasn't heard it in over a week. She throws on her robe and rushes outside, bare feet hitting the cold morning dirt. The windmill turns, slow at first, hesitant, like an old man testing his legs after a long illness. But it turns. The blades catch the morning breeze and rotate with growing confidence. "Thomas," Ellen calls, her voice cracking with emotion. He emerges from the shed, Caleb close behind. Both of them are grinning like schoolboys who've just pulled off the perfect prank. "Listen," Thomas says simply. Ellen stands perfectly still. The windmill creaks and groans, finding its rhythm, and then the most beautiful sound in the world, the splash of water hitting the bottom of the well. "It's working," Ellen breathes. "It's actually working." Caleb runs to the well and lowers a bucket. When he pulls it back up, it's full to the brim with clear, cold water. "Look, Miss Ellen, look how much." Ellen stares at the full bucket. Water spills over the edges, soaking the dry ground. After days of rationing every drop, the sight of abundance makes her knees weak. "I don't know how to thank you," she whispers. Thomas wipes his hands on a rag, suddenly shy. No thanks needed, just glad we could help. But Ellen sees more than modesty in his eyes. She sees satisfaction, pride, the deep contentment of a man who's used his skills to protect something precious. That evening, after a celebration supper, Ellen and Thomas sit on the porch. Caleb has fallen asleep in the spare bedroom, exhausted from days of hard work. The windmill turns steadily against the star-filled sky. Its creaking has become a lullaby, a promise that tomorrow there will be water for the chickens, for cooking, for the struggling garden. "I keep waiting for it to stop," Ellen says softly. "It won't," Thomas assures her. "Those gears are solid, built to last." They sit in comfortable silence, listening to the night sounds, crickets chirping, an owl calling from the barn, the steady, reassuring creak of the windmill. "Thomas," Ellen says finally, "can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Why did you really come here? You're skilled, capable. You could find work anywhere. Why stay and help a widow who can't even pay you properly?" Thomas is quiet for a long moment. When he speaks, his voice is carefully controlled. "After Caleb's mother died, we drifted for 2 years, town to town, ranch to ranch, never staying long enough to belong anywhere." He pauses. "I told myself it was better that way, easier, no attachments, no complications. But watching my son try to make friends with every stray dog and chicken we met, I realized he needed more than just survival. He needed a home. Why, for Batilas." Ellen's chest tightens. "And you think he's found that here?" "I think we both have." The words hang in the air between them. Ellen feels her pulse quicken. Thomas, She stops, shakes her head. I'm 50 years old. I've been a widow for 3 years. I'm set in my ways, stubborn as an old mule. I don't know how to be anything other than what I am. And what's wrong with what you are? Ellen laughs, but there's no humor in it. I'm too old to start over, too old to dream about futures that probably won't happen, too old for... She can't finish the sentence. Too old for what? Thomas asks gently. Ellen looks at her hands, weathered and worn from years of hard work. Too old for love, she whispers. Thomas is quiet for so long that Ellen thinks maybe he didn't hear her. Maybe the windmill's creaking covered her words. Maybe it's better that way. Then he speaks, his voice warm and certain. Ellen, look at me. She raises her eyes to his. I'm old enough to know the difference between wanting someone and needing them. Old enough to know that love isn't about how much time you have left. It's about what you choose to do with whatever time there is. He reaches for her hand. His fingers are calloused from the forge work, scarred from years of hard labor, but his touch is gentle. I'm old enough to choose you forever, Ellen McCrae, however long forever might be. Ellen stares at him, her heart hammering so hard she's sure he can hear it. Thomas, I'm not asking for an answer tonight. I'm not asking for promises. I'm just asking you to consider that maybe some things are worth the risk. A tear slides down Ellen's cheek. When was the last time someone chose her? When was the last time someone saw her not as a burden or a duty, but as someone worth fighting for? I'm scared, she admits. So am I, Thomas says. Scared as hell, but I'm more scared of walking away and spending the rest of my life wondering what might have been. Ellen looks out at the windmill, turning steadily in the night breeze. A week ago, it was broken, useless, a symbol of everything she'd lost. Now it stands strong again, pumping life, giving water from the earth. The windmill, she says softly. What about it? A week ago, I thought it was finished, too old, too damaged to ever work again. She turns to Thomas. But you saw something worth saving. Thomas smiles. Sometimes the best things are the ones that have been tested by time and proven their worth. Ellen thinks about her husband's diary, filled with years of careful observations, about Alice's unwavering friendship through good times and bad, about her own stubborn refusal to give up this land even when it would have been easier to quit. Maybe some things do get better with age. Maybe some foundations grow stronger after they've weathered a few storms. Thomas, she says, her voice steady now. Yes. Ask me again in a month, when the windmill's proven it can keep running, when we've faced whatever Victor Hale is planning, when we know for sure that this, whatever this is between us, can survive more than just gratitude and loneliness. Thomas nods slowly, and if it can. Ellen looks at the windmill, turning against the stars. Then, maybe 50 isn't too old after all. The night wind picks up, and the windmill spins faster, pumping water with renewed vigor. Inside the house, Caleb sleeps peacefully in a real bed for the first time in months. And on the porch, two people who thought their chances at happiness had passed them by sit side by side, listening to the sound of second chances creaking in the wind. Have you ever felt like it was too late for a fresh start? That you'd missed your chance at something important? Share your story in the comments below. Sometimes the best chapters of our lives begin when we least expect them. 3 days of bliss, 3 days of the windmill turning steadily, water flowing freely, and Ellen allowing herself to imagine a different future. Then Silas Boone makes his move. Ellen discovers it on Monday morning when she goes to check the irrigation channels. The channels are bone dry. Not a drop of water flows through the carefully carved ditches her husband built years ago. She follows the dry channels to their source. There, blocking the narrow creek that feeds into her irrigation system, stands a crude dam made of rocks, mud, and fallen tree branches. Silas himself sits on his porch, watching her. When their eyes meet, he doesn't look away, just stares with cold satisfaction. "Thomas," Ellen calls, her voice tight with anger. He appears at her side within moments. One look at the makeshift dam tells him everything. "He's cut off your water supply," Thomas says grimly. "The windmill pumps water from the deep well," Ellen explains, "but the garden irrigation comes from the creek. Without that water—" She doesn't finish. They all understand. Thomas strides toward the dam. "I'll tear it down." "No," Ellen catches his arm. "That would give Victor Hale exactly the excuse he needs." By afternoon, word has spread through town. Alice arrives with troubling news. "I stopped at Peterson's store," Alice reports. "Half the town was there talking about your situation." "What are they saying?" "Some are sympathetic. The Hendersons, the Kellys, they think Silas has gone too far." "And the others?" "They're saying maybe it's time you considered selling, that you're being selfish, holding on to more land and water than one woman needs." Ellen feels the words like physical blows. Selfish? "Victor Hale has been busy, Ellen. He's been meeting with families, suggesting that your water rights are questionable, that resources should be shared more equitably." "What's equitable about sabotage and theft?" Thomas's voice is hard with anger. "Victor's calling it community resource management," Alice says quietly. That evening, the first direct confrontation comes. 3 riders approach: Silas Boone, his grown son Marcus, and Bill Patterson. They stop at her fence but don't dismount. The message is clear. "Ellen," Silas calls out, "we need to talk." Thomas emerges from the barn, his hand resting on a pitchfork handle. Caleb stays close to Ellen's side. "Speak your piece, Silas," Ellen says calmly. "This water situation has gone on long enough. My family's been in this county for 12 years. Bill's been here 10. We got children to feed, crops dying in the field." "And I've been here 15 years, Ellen replies. "With legal water rights, my husband filed proper." Marcus Boone spits into the dust. "Legal rights don't mean much when kids are going hungry." "Then maybe you should talk to Victor Hale about why he's more interested in stirring up trouble than finding real solutions," Thomas says quietly. The 3 men turn their attention to Thomas. Ellen sees calculation in their eyes. "You're new here, mister," Bill Patterson says. "Don't quite understand how things work yet." "I understand perfectly," Thomas replies. "I understand that some men would rather steal than work, rather blame their neighbors than face their own failures." Marcus Boone's hand moves toward the rifle on his saddle. Ellen steps forward quickly. "That's enough. Silas, if you have a legal complaint, file it with Sheriff Carson. Otherwise, get off my property." Silas studies her for a long moment. "You always were too proud, Ellen McCrae. Pride's a luxury you can't afford much longer." He turns his horse and rides away. But Ellen notices they don't head back toward their own farms. Instead, they ride toward town. "They're going to gather more support," Alice observes. That night, the escalation comes. Ellen wakes to Caleb shaking her gently. "Miss Ellen," he whispers, fear in his young voice. Someone's in the yard. Ellen grabs her husband's old rifle and creeps to the window. In the moonlight, she can see shadowy figures near the chicken coop. The sound of squawking chickens fills the night air, then a crash as something heavy hits the coop. They step onto the porch together. The intruders have scattered, but the damage is clear. The chicken coop door hangs broken. Several chickens flutter around in panic. "Henrietta?" Caleb calls out anxiously. They search the yard with a lantern. They find most of the chickens huddled under the porch, terrified but unharmed. But Henrietta, Caleb's favorite, lies still near the barn. "Is she—" Caleb can't finish the question. Thomas kneels beside the bird. "She's alive, but her wing's broken." Caleb's face crumples. Ellen puts her arm around the boy as he begins to cry quiet, heartbroken sobs. "Why would they hurt the chickens?" he asks. "The chickens never did anything wrong." Ellen looks at Thomas over Caleb's head. They both understand. This isn't about chickens. This is about fear. About showing Ellen that she's not safe, that the people and animals she cares about are vulnerable. "We'll fix her wing," Ellen tells Caleb gently. "Chickens are tougher than they look." But as she holds the crying child, Ellen wonders how many more attacks she can withstand. In the distance toward town, she sees the faint glow of lights. People awake in the middle of the night. People talking, planning, deciding her fate. The windmill turns steadily overhead, but its creaking sounds different now. Not like a lullaby, but like a warning. Time is running out. The notice appears on the church bulletin board on Thursday morning. Community water rights hearing Saturday, 2 p.m. All concerned citizens welcome. Alice finds it first and rides straight to Ellen's farm. "They're calling for a public hearing," Alice announces. "Victor Hale has convinced Pastor Williams to let them use the church." "What kind of hearing?" "The unofficial kind that can ruin your life," Alice says grimly. "Victor gathers public opinion, creates pressure, makes people choose sides." Ellen stares at the notice. "I won't go." "If you don't go, they'll make decisions about your water rights without you there. Victor will control the entire narrative." Friday passes in tense preparation. Alice helps Ellen organize James's documentation, water rights filings, government certificates, payment receipts. Thomas makes quiet inquiries in town. "Victor's been busy," he reports. "He's promised the Hendersons they can expand their cattle operation if they support redistribution. Told the Petersons their store would benefit from more prosperous farms." Saturday arrives gray and windy. Ellen dresses in her best black dress, the one she wore to James's funeral. If she's going to face judgment, she'll do it with dignity. The church is packed when they arrive, every pew filled, people standing along the walls. Ellen hasn't seen this many people gathered since the Harvest Festival. Victor Hale stands at the front, behind the pastor's podium, looking every inch the successful attorney. He's transformed the humble church into his courtroom. Ellen takes a seat in the third row, Thomas on one side, Alice on the other. Caleb pressed close. "Friends and neighbors," Victor begins, his voice carrying easily through the space. "We're here today to address water rights in times of scarcity." He pauses, letting his gaze sweep the crowd. Mrs. McCrae has legal documents dating back 15 years. No one disputes that. But the question is whether legal technicalities should override moral obligations to our community. Ellen feels heat rise in her cheeks. Legal technicalities? Her husband's carefully filed claims reduced to technicalities. "Silas Boone has 5 children," Victor continues, Bill Patterson has 3. The Henderson family has been struggling to keep their cattle alive. Meanwhile, one person controls water resources sufficient for multiple families. Murmurs ripple through the crowd. Seems unfair. Children going without, always been selfish. Thomas's hand finds hers, squeezing gently. I'm not suggesting Mrs. McCrae should be left without water. That would be unchristian, but surely we can find a more equitable distribution. Tadita, idamadari ri niam. Ellen stands. The room falls silent. May I speak? She asks. Victor gestures magnanimously. Of course, Mrs. McCrae. Ellen walks to the front, aware of every eye upon her. She turns to face the crowd, neighbors she's known for 15 years. My husband James filed legal claims for our water rights in 1874, she begins. He paid the territorial fees. He followed every law. He did everything required to establish our legal ownership. A few heads nod, but most faces remain impassive. Silas Boone chose not to file claims when he had the chance. The Henderson family spent their money on cattle instead. These were their decisions, made freely. Times were different then, someone calls out. Water wasn't so scarce. Times are always hard on the frontier, Ellen replies. My husband planned for that. Are you asking me to give up what he worked for because others chose differently? Victor steps forward smoothly. We're simply asking you to share, to be a good neighbor. By giving up half my water to people who destroyed my windmill? Gasps echo through the room. This is the first time anyone has made the sabotage accusation publicly. Silas Boone stands, his face red with anger. That's a damn lie. I got witnesses, Silas continues. Marcus was with me that whole night. Then explain the metal shavings, Ellen says. Explain the stripped gears. Equipment fails, Victor says calmly, especially old equipment. Mrs. McCrae, these accusations are unfortunate and unproven. Ellen feels the room turning against her. She's being painted as bitter, paranoid, selfish. The real issue, Ellen says, her voice rising, is that you're asking me to give up my legal rights based on nothing more than popular opinion. The real issue, Victor counters, is whether one person's legal claims should outweigh the community's survival. The room erupts in discussion, neighbors arguing, children crying. Ellen stands at the front, feeling utterly alone despite Thomas and Alice's support. I call for a community vote, Victor announces over the chaos. All in favor of asking Mrs. McCrae to voluntarily share water resources with families in need? Hands shoot up throughout the room. Ellen counts them with sinking heart. More than half the congregation. All opposed? Fewer hands rise. Alice is among them, Thomas's, the Crawfords, a handful of others, but they're outnumbered 2-1. The community has spoken, Victor declares with satisfaction. Mrs. McCrae, I trust you'll consider this expression of your neighbor's wishes. Ellen looks out at the sea of faces, some guilty, some defiant, most simply relieved. These people she's lived among for 15 years have just voted to strip away her security. I'll consider it, Ellen says quietly, but I want you all to remember something. Today, you voted to take from one person to give to others. Next time, when someone comes for what's yours, remember how easy it was to let them do it. She walks down the aisle toward the door, Thomas and Alice flanking her, Caleb hurrying to keep up. Outside the church, Ellen stops and takes a shaky breath. Ellen, Alice says gently, they can't legally force you to. They don't need to force me, Ellen interrupts. They've made it clear I'm not welcome here anymore, not unless I give them what they want. She looks back at the church. Maybe it's time to consider leaving after all. Thomas catches her arm. Ellen, no! Don't let them win! Win? Ellen laughs bitterly. Thomas, they just convinced my own community to vote against me. What exactly am I fighting for anymore? Sunday morning dawns with Sheriff Carson riding up to Ellen's farm, his weathered face grim. Mrs. McCrae, he tips his hat, got a complaint filed against you yesterday evening. Ellen's heart sinks. What kind of complaint? Victor Hale says you're in violation of community water usage agreements, says the town council voted to redistribute water resources, and you're refusing to comply. Sida. There is no town council, Ellen says quietly. Only legal water rights that my husband filed properly 15 years ago. Sheriff Carson shifts uncomfortably. Ma'am, I'm not here to argue law. I'm here to keep the peace. And right now, feelings are running pretty high in town. What exactly are you asking me to do, Sheriff? Victor Hale's requesting a formal hearing tomorrow morning, 10 o'clock at the courthouse in Cheyenne. Official territorial business this time. Ellen stares at him. Cheyenne? That's a 3-day ride? Day and a half if you push hard. Hearing set whether you're there or not. After the sheriff leaves, Ellen sits on her porch steps, staring at the legal summons. Official territorial letterhead, the full weight of government authority being brought to bear on one widow's water rights. It's a trap, Sepor. Thomas says bluntly. Victor knows you can't make it to Cheyenne in time. He's counting on you missing the hearing. Maybe that's best, Ellen says wearily. Maybe I should just let them have what they want. Ellen McCrae. Alice's voice cuts through the morning air like a blade. She rides up fast, her hair disheveled, her face flushed with determination. Don't you dare give up now. Alice, you saw what happened yesterday. My own neighbors voted against me. What's the point? Kiadam. The point, Alice interrupts, dismounting with sharp movements, is that I spent all last night thinking about what happened in that church, and I realized something. She pulls a thick folder from her saddlebag. Victor Hale made a mistake yesterday, a big one. What kind of mistake? Thomas asks. Alice's eyes blaze with fierce intelligence. He told everyone that your water rights were just legal technicalities, that the community's needs should override individual property rights. That's what he's been saying all along. Yes, but yesterday he said it in front of Pastor Williams and Mrs. Henderson and the Kellys and every other family in this county who owns legal claims to their own property. Alice spreads papers across the porch. I spent all night going through territorial records, Ellen. Land deeds, mineral rights, grazing permits, water claims. Ellen shakes her head, not understanding. Victor Hale doesn't just want your water, Ellen. He wants your land, and the Hendersons' grazing rights, and the Kellys' timber claims, and half the legal property ownership in this county. Alice points to official documents covered in her neat handwriting. 6 months ago, Victor filed papers requesting a comprehensive review of resource distribution in frontier communities. He's not just coming for your water, he's coming for everyone's legal claims. Thomas leans forward, studying the papers. What's his angle? Control, Alice says grimly. If he can establish precedent, the community needs override individual property rights, he can redistribute anything. All controlled by whoever has the political influence to define community needs. Ellen feels something shift inside her chest, a spark of the old fire that's kept her fighting for 15 years. He's been planning this all along, she realizes. The sabotage, the community pressure, Silas's attacks. It was all to create a crisis he could exploit. Exactly. And yesterday, he made his intentions clear in front of the entire community. People who thought they were just voting to share water resources. People who don't realize they're next on his list. Alice gathers the papers with fierce determination. Ellen, we're going to that hearing, all of us, and we're going to expose Victor Hale for what he really is. Alice, it's a day and a half to Cheyenne. We'll never make it in time. We'll make it, Thomas says firmly. I know these roads. We can be there by tomorrow morning if we leave now and ride through the night. 2 hours later, they're on the road to Cheyenne. Ellen rides her husband's old gelding, Thomas and Caleb share his chestnut mare, and Alice keeps pace on her spirited bay. As evening falls, they meet other riders heading toward Cheyenne. The Henderson family, grim-faced and determined. The Kellys with their teenage son. Even Pastor Williams looking nervous but resolute. Alice talked to us this morning, Bill Henderson explains when they stopped to rest the horses. Showed us them papers. If Victor Hale can take Ellen's water, what's to stop him taking our grazing rights next? Nothing, Pastor Williams adds quietly. I've been a fool, listening to his smooth words, but Alice opened my eyes. Word has spread. By the time they make camp for a few hours of rest, their small group has become a caravan. 12 families, all with legal claims. They're suddenly afraid of losing. Ellen, Alice says as they sit by the small campfire, I need to tell you something. Yesterday, after the church meeting, I made a choice. You won, Jan. What kind of choice? Victor Hale approached me, offered me a position as territorial education supervisor. Better pay, more influence, a chance to reform the entire school system. Ellen stares at her friend. Alice! All I had to do was stay quiet about your situation, let you lose gracefully, move on to other matters. Why are you telling me this? Alice's voice grows fierce. Because I told him no. Because I realized that a system where you have to abandon your friends to get ahead isn't worth reforming. And because some things are more important than career advancement. Ellen reaches across the campfire and squeezes Alice's hand. You risked everything for me. I risked everything for what's right, Alice corrects. There's a difference. They reach Cheyenne at dawn, dusty and exhausted, but determined. The courthouse is already busy, but their arrival causes a stir. 12 families from the same county, all demanding to be heard. At exactly 10 o'clock, they file into the magistrate's chamber. Victor Hale is already there, looking polished and confident. His expression changes when he sees the crowd behind Ellen. Your Honor, Victor begins smoothly, I've called for this hearing to address a matter of community resource distribution. Objection, Alice interrupts, standing boldly. Your Honor, I request permission to present evidence that this case is part of a larger scheme to defraud property owners of their legal rights. The magistrate, a stern-faced man in his 60s, raises an eyebrow. This is a water rights hearing, not a fraud trial. The two are connected, Your Honor. If I may present evidence. Alice spreads her research across the table. Territorial documents, property filings, Victor Hale's own legal papers. Mr. Hale has filed requests to review not just Mrs. McCrae's water rights, but land claims, mineral rights, and grazing permits belonging to most of the families in this room. He's attempting to establish legal precedent that community needs, as defined by him, override individual property rights. Victor's face remains calm, but Ellen sees something flicker in his eyes. Your Honor, Mrs. Monroe is creating a conspiracy where none exists. I'm simply trying to help a community resolve water disputes fairly. Then explain them, Ellen says, standing and pulling out her husband's diary. She's never spoken in a courtroom before, but as she opens the worn leather cover, she feels James's presence beside her, steadying her voice. My husband, James McCrae, filed water rights claims in 1874. Legal claims, properly documented, fees paid in full. She reads from the diary. April 15, 1874. Filed water rights claim with Territorial Office. Paid $15 filing fee. Certificate number 347. Legal ownership of well and associated water sources established. Ellen looks up at the magistrate. Your Honor, this isn't about sharing resources. This is about whether legal property rights mean anything or whether they can be overturned by community pressure orchestrated by men who want to control those resources themselves. She turns to face Victor directly. Mr. Hale, exactly what legal authority do you have to redistribute my property? For the first time, Victor Hale looks uncertain. The authority of community welfare. That's not a legal authority, Ellen interrupts. That's an opinion, and opinions don't override legal property rights. The magistrate studies the documents carefully. Ellen's original certificates, James's meticulous diary entries, Alice's research showing Victor's broader intentions. Finally, he speaks. Mr. Hale, can you present any legal documentation that supersedes Mrs. McCrae's original water rights claims? Your Honor, the community has expressed its will. The community doesn't have legal authority to redistribute private property, the magistrate says firmly. Mrs. McCrae's water rights are clearly established and legally valid. This case is dismissed. A cheer goes up from the families behind Ellen, but the magistrate isn't finished. Furthermore, Mr. Hale, I'm ordering a full investigation into your other pending requests for property rights review. If this court finds evidence of systematic attempts to defraud legal property owners, criminal charges will be filed. Victor Hale's face goes white. Without another word, he gathers his papers and rushes from the courtroom. Outside the courthouse, Ellen stands in the morning sunlight, holding James's diary against her chest. Around her, neighbors who were strangers yesterday shake hands and make plans to protect each other's rights in the future. Ellen, Alice says gently, how do you feel? Ellen looks at Thomas, who's holding a sleeping Caleb in his arms, at Alice, who risked everything to stand beside her, at the families who learned the importance of fighting for what's right. I feel, Ellen says slowly, like it's not about age at all. It's not about being too old or too young for anything. It's about having the courage to fight for what matters, no matter when the fight comes. Thomas smiles. Does that mean you've decided about us, about giving love another chance? Ellen walks to him, reaches up, and cups his face gently in her weathered hands. Thomas Garrison, she says, I'm old enough to know what I want, and young enough to fight for it. If you're still willing to choose me forever? Forever, Thomas says firmly, however long forever might be. As they kiss in the morning sunlight, Caleb wakes up and grins. Does this mean Henrietta gets to stay too? Ellen laughs, a sound of pure joy that echoes off the courthouse steps. Everyone gets to stay, sweetheart. We're all going home together. The windmill will be turning when they get back. The water will be flowing, and the house that was once silent will ring with the voices of a chosen family, built not on blood or law, but on the courage to stand together when it matters most. 3 weeks later. The Wyoming wind carries different sounds now. The steady creak of the windmill, turning strong against the autumn sky. The laughter of children playing in Ellen's yard, not just Caleb, but the Henderson kids, the Kelly twins, even shy Mary Crawford from town. Ellen stands at her kitchen window, watching Thomas repair the fence with Caleb's eager help. The boy has grown taller in just these few weeks, his shoulders broader from farm work, his face bright with the confidence of belonging somewhere. "Hand me that wire, son," Thomas says, and the word son comes so naturally now that Ellen's heart swells with quiet joy. Alice appears in the doorway, arms full of fresh bread. "The children are asking for more stories about brave women in the Old West," she announces. "I told them I know one personally." Ellen smiles. "Just one?" "Well, maybe two. That Henderson girl has been asking some very pointed questions about water rights law." Through the window, Ellen sees Henrietta pecking in the dirt, her wing heeled strong, leading a parade of younger chickens around the yard. Even the bird has thrived here, in this place where broken things learn to fly again. Ellen opens James's diary to a fresh page and writes, October 8th, 1889. First hard frost last night, but the late vegetables survived under their covers. Thomas says the windmill gears are running smooth as silk. Caleb learned to milk the cow this morning, only got kicked twice. Alice brought news that Victor Hale was arrested in Denver for land fraud. Justice sometimes moves slow, but it moves. She pauses, pen hovering over the page, then adds, "Some chapters end, some begin. Some, if you're lucky, pick up exactly where they need to." That evening, as the sun sets over the Wyoming plains, Ellen and Thomas sit on the porch they've rebuilt together. Caleb chases fireflies in the yard, while Alice reads aloud from a book of poetry. "Speaking of family," Alice says with a mischievous smile, "when exactly are you two planning to make this arrangement official?" Ellen feels heat rise in her cheeks. Alice Munro! Thomas reaches for Ellen's hand. "What do you think, Mrs. McCrae? Ready to become Mrs. Garrison?" Ellen looks at this man who saw something worth saving in a broken windmill and a stubborn woman. "I think," Ellen says slowly, "that Ellen Garrison has a nice ring to it." Caleb whoops from the yard. "Does that mean I get to call you Ma for real?" Ellen's eyes fill with tears, the good kind, the kind that come from hearts too full of happiness to hold it all inside. "If you want to, sweetheart, if you want to." The boy runs to the porch and throws his arms around Ellen's waist. "I want to. I've wanted to for weeks." As full darkness settles over the farm, Ellen writes one final entry in James's diary. "Tonight I understand what James knew when he built this place. Home isn't about the land you own or the water you control. It's about the people you choose to love, and who choose to love you back. The windmill turns strong tonight. Tomorrow it will turn again, and all of us, Thomas, Caleb, Alice, even Henrietta, will all be here to hear it." She closes the diary and looks up at the windmill, silhouetted against the star-filled sky. Its blades turn steadily in the night breeze, pumping life from deep in the earth, bringing water to the surface where it can nourish and sustain. Tonight, as Ellen listens to its familiar creaking, no longer the sound of loneliness, but the sound of home, she knows that some things do get better with age. Some foundations grow stronger after they've weathered the storms. And some love stories begin exactly when they're supposed to, whether you're 20 or 50 or any age at all. The windmill turns against the infinite Wyoming sky, and Ellen McCrae Garrison smiles, knowing that the best chapters of her life are still being written. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who needs to remember that it's never too late for a new beginning. And tell us in the comments, what's your own story of second chances? Sometimes the most beautiful chapters come after we think the story is over.